Gue, aloha, bonjour, buongiorno, buenos dias, salam alaikum. Good day, mate. Good morning. Thank you very much. We're very delighted to be invited to come to Mohawk territory here. And of course, I used to get a room and board at the Ganawage Reserve when I was coming here for the jazz festivals every year. So I don't feel so much of a stranger here. I love that place. It so happened there was a Mi'kmaq person living there by the name of Albert Knockwood from the Pictou Landing Reserve in Nova Scotia. And he was in his 80s by the time I met him, and the only time the poor man had an opportunity to speak to his own language was when I visited him, which was once a year. But nevertheless, he and I got along famously, and he was happy to see me every year, and finally he passed on. But when I first listened to John this morning, I have to say, it always reminds me of the time when I hear this Australian accent. It always reminds me of the time that this test pilot from the United States, they were testing flights, their new war machines, I could say, somewhere there. And anyway, this guy had a severe problem. Must have been a 737 with that flight. And anyway, while he was testing it, of course, he realized this, he can't control it. It's going out of control, so of course he tried the ejection seat. That didn't work. Anyway, he brought it down, and it was a mess, and he was a mess, but he was alive. He was unconscious, alive, broken leg, broken arm, broken ribs, And of course, they take him to the hospital, and he doesn't wake up until the following day. One leg is up on a swing, the other one, the arm is up on a sling, and of course, he's all strapped up and everything. And when he finally wakes up, the nurse didn't realize that he had awoken. So anyway, he's kind of looking around, looking at his condition. So he says to the nurse, was I brought in here to die? And the nurse said, no, you were brought in here used to die. So, so every time I hear it, I said, oh, geez, I got to, pass this along. But what you have there, it says the language of this land, Mi'kmaq. Of course, Mi'kmaq is the territory of the Mi'kmaq people, namely, formerly, the Micmac people, which was just a simple mispronunciation on the part of our non-native brothers and sisters. But one of the reasons why we were kind of forced to write this book, we were writing material, and our material was being used by people who didn't have a full understanding. When they gave a presentation, they used bits and pieces of it without really knowing the background. So a professor contacted us at Cape Breton University and said, you better sit down and write a book. So we sat down and we got going and wrote this language of this land. But there were things, that as I was doing research beginning in 1974, when I began my training as a linguist, I began to see some interesting things about our language. It was kind of like, linguistics was kind of like a tool that someone had given me, much like a carpenter would get a hammer and a saw. In my case, it was like someone giving me a microscope to look a little bit more closely to what's contained in the Mi'kmaq language, which is part of the Algonquin group. And that was interesting enough, because there were things in there which kind of bothered me, such as the word Membertou, and that's the word for devil. And as I was, looking at it more closely, I began to think in the middle of my training, I say maybe 2 years into my training, I began to wonder, I never, as a kid, and I didn't learn. I didn't learn English and started learning English until I was maybe 11 years old. So all my stories, all my legends were entirely in the Mi'kmaq language. And all of a sudden I said, what's this word Membertou? I mean, if it's the devil, then why haven't I heard any stories about the devil? There was none. And of course, as a linguist, now that I have my tool called linguistics, I began to analyze this word Membertou. And I decided, I began to reconstruct the word and started putting vowels between the N and the T in the middle of the word. It's spelled M-N-T-U. And then finally, just like a bolt of lightning, I realized, I don't believe what I'm finding out here. This is the old word for our Creator. And it's related, of course, to Manitou, you know. So then, of course, the next question, of course, was, how did it get to be a devil, you know? So I figured, no, we didn't have a devil, so he must have been a stowaway in one of those ships. Well, he must have been. So then I decided then, geez, I better start writing about this. So I wrote it in the native newspapers and stuff, saying, well, you can continue to think about it as you will. If you want to think that Mindu is the devil, go ahead, knock yourself out. But really, it originates from our old word. And of course, it was the missionaries. They had to, many of the words, which if I had time, I could tell you about, they're all interesting. But that were held in reverence by the Mi'kmaq people were flip-flopped by the missionaries. And it was the only way that they could infiltrate this powerful spiritual culture, you know, that we had. But now I've got perhaps 30 seconds or whatever. I just want to tell you this one word, which I have in this book, which got me thinking about stuff. It was a letter that was slapped on my desk by the former president, late Alexander Denny. He was the president of the Union of Nova Scotia Indians, as we were called then. He brought this paper, it was probably 2 pages long, and he slaps it on my desk. And we were in the same office building, and he said, Bernie, he said, can you make head or tail of this? I looked at this paper, and I knew it was Mi'kmaq, but I figured, no, geez, I don't know, leave it with me. Anyway, that 2 pages, written in 1750, dictated by a Mi'kmaq chief to what our people called Musmayal, which took me a while to figure that out. But as it turns out, Musmayal is Monsieur Maillard. And of course I said, it sounded Micmac, but I guess it was French. Anyway, so I took this letter and realized it was a letter written to Cornwallis. He was the infamous governor of Halifax who put a bounty on our scalps. Don't get any ideas, by the way. That law has been repealed, so leave me alone. Anyway, it was 40 pounds for an adult scalp and 20 pounds for a child's scalp at the time. But when this Mi'kmaq chief wrote to him, he simply said at the time, he used this term, sahaliach, which I've never heard that particular term used for anything other than springtime when the leaves start to bud, the trees start to bud and the leaves started to come out. It means things are beginning to show or beginning to bud, you know, this kind of thing. And you hear it, but I never, in that letter, I saw that this chief said to Cornwallis in the letter, he said, Detna waji saliadiak. Detna, and then that word, waji, and then saliadiak. What he was saying to them was, we didn't come from anywhere else. We sprouted from here. That was the word that came out in my translation, sprouted. We didn't come from here. He never used any of those. We sprouted from here. So that really, after I did, it took me 30 days, by the way, to translate these 2 pages because it was very, very old Mi'kmaq, but I did get it. And it wasn't until after I finished working on it that I finally said, you know, this is fantastic. Now I'm going to read it. When I read it, just as I would read a letter, I was alone in my office. I'm kind of glad that I was alone because the tears started to flow. And it was because of that letter that man wrote in 1750 to Governor Cornwallis when he said, you know, this is where we're from here. We sprouted here. We didn't come from anywhere else. And our language grew from this area. So I can't take up any more of your time, but I do wish if you have any questions later, we can get together. And I thank you, mahalo, walalio, thank you.